Hello there, and welcome to this Geogramblings video for the UK EdChat Conference 2020. My name is Kit Rackley. I run the Geogramblings.com blog, and I will be looking at fact-checking and fake news and how we can equip our students to think critically in order to combat these elements that we're facing today, in terms of particularly with regards to fake news. And I would like to start with this here. This is what we used to think fake news is. Parody newspapers like The Onion, which is based in Minnesota, the United States. In fact, these guys are actually having trouble now because of the amount of real fake news out there, so to speak. And, you know, it's kind of almost got to that point is that you can't make it up anymore. But here are some well-known examples here. So the anti-vaccination kind of thing, you know, political kind of unsubstantiated claims, and the very well-known, more recent one about the 5G coronavirus not link. But of course, the issue with this is not only are these very, very, well, they're fake, but they can be quite dangerous and quite polarizing, and can really cause harm. So in that respect, you could argue that the teaching of critical thinking skills and helping to identify things like fake news and things like that could even be a safeguarding issue, if you want to go to that point. So, but this term infodemic is really interesting. It's pretty new, and it was coined by the Director General of the WHO, and he said, "We are not fighting just an epidemic," with reference to the coronavirus. We're fighting an infodemic. Now, if you stick that word in a Word document or spell checker, it will come up as a nonsense word. But it just goes to show that, you know, we're in this era now where even new words are being generated, and infodemic is certainly going to be in a dictionary sometime soon, because now you'll see it all over the place. So the kind of like absolute proliferation of these kind of news stories which are fake or heavily circumspect. So the three things I'm going to look at today to help our students along with this is how can they be aware of bias in the first place, some activities to promote some critical thinking, and there's a really good, fantastic tool which there's a various number of ideas and ways that you can use it called the media bias chart. So we'll look at that too. But to start, it's very, very important, or very useful, shall I say, that students are aware of bias in the first place. You know, the recognition and awareness is a very important step. And in order for the kind of techniques you're going to use with your students to be effective, if they're aware of the biases and what they are in the first place, they can recognize them, and it makes it more, you know, a bit more of a catalyst, so to speak, to help them kind of recognize fake news and how to go about being more critical of it. So here's one of the things that you could use. This is really good from Business Insider. If you just simply search for 20 cognitive biases that screw up your decisions by Business Insider, you come up with this lovely infographic. I'm not going to take you through every one of these 20, but one thing you could do with your students is kind of maybe get a nice activity. You can make cards out of them or whatever, and get them to see which of these can they identify with, which, and then be, you know, an open and a very safe environment provide for them that they start to admit, well, maybe I do suffer from these kind of biases. Maybe rank them to what they think. But three in particular, I think might kind of resonate with students in particular. The bandwagon effect. You know, always want to do what their friends want to do, be in the same group as their friend, all that kind of stuff. So the bandwagon effect is a bias they'll recognize. Confirmation bias is very strong for all age groups, of course, but particularly, you know, only hearing or seeing or accepting what they want to hear, see, or accept. So that's confirmation bias. And then, of course, stereotyping, so making really unsubstantiated extrapolations about a whole group of people or a situation based on very minute data, or a single person or a small group of people, a small sample size or something. So there are three which I think they can identify with very quickly. Another thing that you can do to help them recognize bias is a fantastic video by Hans and Ola Rosling, the late Hans Rosling. How not to be ignorant about the world, very easily searchable on the TED Talks. Fantastic video about the way in which the human race is ignorant of itself, especially in terms of human development, and where these biases come from. And then Ola Rosling talks about some simple tips and tricks you can do to kind of mitigate those biases. Very interesting, fantastic video, worth a look. So let's have a look at some activities we could do to promote critical thinking. This one I used to use quite a lot, particularly with the younger students. This will be quite good with the primary students and young students, but it can work with any age. And that is when you're looking at images, have a look at the foreground, the background, the four corners and space. In other words, really dive into that image. And it's very good at addressing three biases in particular, anchoring bias. So as soon as I put that up, what was your initial thought? And you're going to stick with it, and that's what you're going to fuel your emotion from. This is Greta Thunberg. She's eating out of plastic. What a hypocrite! And she's telling us to save the world. So that's a reaction based on an anchoring bias, and you focus on that one thing. Salience, like only focusing on what you understand, so or what you can see. So you know, the fact that this is in Danish here, you probably might, you know, a lot of people might not even bother to kind of figure out what that actually means or what it actually says. So there's a bit of salience there, and stereotyping, you know, especially maybe some certain demographic find Greta very irritating, shall we say, and of course then they stereotype pretty much, you know, all young people like this or like that, telling that they all don't respect their elders, all that kind of stuff. So acknowledging that those three exist is a very good thing to start, as I said, acknowledging the bias. But then we can move on to tools like, okay, how can we actually analyse this picture and not just jump in and kind of, with all the Twitter comments that come on this, just like jumping to conclusions and jumping on bandwagons and things like that. So first thing to do, look at the foreground. So this will deal with the anchoring bias. So okay, let's look at this foreground again. Right, so she's eating a meal. It's probably lunchtime if we look at, you know, the time of day, but that's the background. We're not looking at that. She's eating hummus, bread, bananas. So she's okay. She likes to eat quite healthily. But I mean, we can't judge on one meal, but this is what we're seeing at the moment. She's using reusable, reusable bottle. She's got a paper cup. And yes, indeed, some of the food is in plastic single-use packaging. So that's what we can see at the moment. But let's then look at the background. Let's dive a little bit deeper. So she's in transit, okay. Given the makeup of everything here, looks like she's on a train. The way it's set up, the trees are going by pretty quickly. So she's probably intercity, between one city and another, I imagine. So let's now have a look at the four corners, because these tend to get missed when looking at photographs. So right here, so if we look at this a bit more closely and then run this through a translator, that's a pot of Danish vegan salad. Okay, now have a look at the other side. Just see on the edge of the frame there, another bit of plastic. Now it could be another single-use plastic. It could be a Tupperware. It's kind of shaped that way, isn't it? So we don't know one way or the other. We can't see the whole thing. So we can make some substantiated assumptions on either or, a bit of Schrodinger's cat kind of thing there, which from one or the other. And then, yeah, okay, so there's nothing really much we can tell. We've done this in the background, and then there's not really much we can see on the other four corners. And then the other one is space. Now, space is basically, is there anything of the picture you have not touched or have not paid attention to? But I think we've covered everything with foreground, background, and four corners. So then and we have to acknowledge that we're making assumptions. What assumptions, but a substantiated assumptions, can we make on our observations now? Okay, so we've confirmed that she's in Denmark because we've looked at the salad plot and translated it. So okay, she's got some, well, she's not faking that, she's in Denmark. So she's either travelling within Denmark, leaving it after spending some time there. She's on a train, she's eating a meal bought in Denmark. She's eating a low carbon meal because we've got some vegan food there, we've got some fruit. She doesn't seem to have any animal products, and she's using single plastic indeed. But this is where a little bit of background information comes in. So when we do a bit of research into Greta's activities and look at that, and we think that she's likely to be the person who would recycle these single-use plastics or keep them down to a minimum. So we can then bring in some further research there. So you can see how deep we've gone into that photo and tried to grit our teeth and get through those initial biases and then get into that analysis and that critical thinking stage. So we haven't really made a judgment about Greta herself. We've just tried to build a picture about what's really going on in this image. Okay, so another activity, this is a really good one that I picked up when I was helping with the training for the Geographical Association's Critical Thinking for Achievement course. And it's called a question generator. So you can take any stimulus or stimuli. Could be a picture like the one we've just seen, or another picture, a series of pictures. It could be a poem, a piece of text, a news article, a video, an object, any stimulus whatsoever. So this is a very cross-curricular task. And then what you then do is that you pose this to the students. They do this in groups or individually, and then try and answer these questions. So it's very Bloom's taxonomy quite-ish, because you've got kind of almost the kind of low order thinking, and then it kind of progressively gets higher order as you go down here. But it wasn't designed to be in that respect. It's just how it pans out. And here's an example for Typhoon Hyans. This is some real responses from students that have been typed up. And you can see how the questioning has become better. It's become sharper. And that is a very good way of building critical thinking skills, because if you can ask better questions and sharper questions, you can really drill down into an issue rather than just lose yourself to biases and make judgments in that respect. So to finish off here, we're going to look at the media bias chart, and this is a fantastic tool that I try to use as much as I can in my personal circumstances as well. And this is from Addendums Media, and what I really like about this is that the lady who generated this has done a brilliant job, that she's self-critical, and she actually is very transparent with how she's gone about making all these judgments. So here is political bias on the x-axis here. So to the left, like, skews politically to the left, or to the right, skews politically to the right. And then the y-axis here is a judgment, kind of like an algorithm which judges about how factual and how substantiated their reporting is. I don't think it counts opinion eds, so it's purely on the reporting of news, and opinion eds can pull these anyway, which way or forwards. This is purely on the basis of news articles and news reporting. And the other thing, as I said, that she does is really, really good, is that she does talk about her limitations as well. If you look at the website, she talks all about that kind of stuff. And so I kind of find this is a very, very reliable source. And there has actually been some independent verification of this, which I'll show you very shortly. So some activities that we can do on this. A very simple one. Whenever you set a piece of research homework, or students are going to use a source or two, only get it from the green zone, which is very, very limited bias, if any, or neutral, and very fact-based. So you can see there's a lot of news sources that you can use. So you can see the BBC is there. So the BBC is always a good source for news. Now, the interesting thing about the BBC is that you get some people on the left who accuse it of being too conservative, and you get some people on the right who accuse it of being too liberal. Perhaps therefore the BBC has got the balance right. I mean, we can all use our biases to judge on what we think the BBC are, but this independent tool has seemed to assess it to be almost bang in the middle, just slightly left, very, very slightly skewed left, but very factual based. So this independent tool believes in that. Okay, so some activities we could do. So how about a piece of group work here? So 6 groups, same issue, HS2, building a crossrail, fracking. I'm just giving some geography examples here: coastal erosion, coastal management, or anything like, LGBT rights. So pick out a source on a particular issue or topic from these different things here. Now, if you want a bit of fun, don't tell the students that they're all coming from different points of view and different biases, to see if they can discover that for themselves. So if this group takes something from this, you give them something from here, another group take something from here, etc, etc, etc. They do their stuff, they do their analysis, however you want to do it, and they start feeding back as a class, and they think, well, these are some really wild and different points of view, and well, that's not what this says at all, but this person said this. And actually that could be quite fun when they start discovering that there are so many different ways of reporting the same issue. So that's a really, really good one. It gets them attuned into kind of the different ways of reporting things like that. Another one, regards to the different sides of a controversial issue. So mirroring. So give students something from here, from the left, and analyze it, see what the language is, how they come about, what's the point of view, and then almost flip it, exact mirror image. So on the other side. And how is the reporting any different? What's the point? Is there any different point of view? Is there any overlap between the points of view? Is there any common ground? That could be a good way of actually showing that there can be common ground between people with different points of view. Is this source reliable? So starting with something from a source really down here, which is almost borderline making up stuff, and then taking the same topic from up here somewhere and seeing a difference in reporting, that the fact that you can verify facts and things like that. So that's a really good way of kind of showing how you can keep an eye out for more reliable sources, and what does a reliable source look like compared to one which maybe isn't so reliable. And then a nice really one here, you could do a bit of peer assessment. So maybe you set a task and then they peer assess each other when it's done. Not necessarily on the fact of the content of their work, but maybe of the sources. So maybe the criteria for the work is they've had to cite their sources, and then their partner on back to school or for homework then takes it and then makes a judgment on the sources that they've used. And actually you can see there are numbers down on this chart, so they can actually give them a score about how factual or how biased the sources they've used, and maybe give a comment to say, it seems that you've used a source as to this way, please consider this site, or whatever. So that's a really, really good thing can be done there. Now, you would have noticed that a lot of those media outlets on there were quite US-centric. There were some UK ones, The Guardian, The Daily Mail, the BBC were on there. But if you want more UK coverage, this is an alternative website, mediabiasfactcheck.com, which is really good. I don't use this one just as much because it's not as pretty or interactive, but it is really, really good. So you do use it if you can't find what you need on Addendums Media. In fact, these guys have independently verified the one I've just shown you. So here's their judgment on Addendums Media. So you see here with the bias scale, they've got here ever so slightly left, skews to the left, but pretty much has little bias. And in terms of factual information, high there. And then down in the description, if you were to scroll down the website and see what they've said, they give a reason for their judgments and things like that, and they're pretty satisfied and happy with the quality of what they do, and they think it's a very reliable resource. Okay, I hope you found that very useful. Bit of further reading for you, because of course in the 20 minutes I've had to go through them in a bit of a rush. I go into more detail with some of the things that you've seen on my Geogramblings blog. So if you just search for those 2 articles there are ways that you can get some more detail and some more opinions, advice, help, resources on what you've seen. Visit the Geographical Association's website, Critical Thinking for Achievement page. Download lots of resources, case studies about how primary teachers, secondary teachers have gone about developing critical thinking skills with their students. It's all there archived, ready for you to look at. That's where that question grid came from. If you really love to find dig a bit deeper, bit of some articles, that infodemic kind of thing came from this Lancet article. That's a really interesting read. And finally, fully recommended this, and any geography colleague of you will say the same as well. Get yourself a copy of Hans and Ola Rosling's Factfulness book. It's a play on mindfulness, but in terms of being more sensible and more data smart, and some really, really good. I wouldn't say an optimistic look at the world, but a realistic look at the world and what the data actually shows, and that the fact that our worldview is still 50 years in the past, and also talks about how we can deal with some of the biases and trying to update our worldview, but strongly recommended. So do visit me at geogramblings.com. You can also find me on Twitter, at Facebook as Geogramblings, and it'll be fantastic if you give me a follow and a like. Thank you very much.